For information about investing in character-led companies, please visit www.rocinvestments.com and join the growing number of investors choosing to make character a priority when investing their money.
Welcome to another episode of Return on Character Podcast with me, your host, Dan Cooper, CEO and founder of Rock Investments, an investment strategy that allocates capital on the basis of the character of the leaders running the companies we invest in. I'm very honored and excited and humbled to have my dear friend Scott Nydam with us today. Hello, Scott.
Hello, Dan and everyone else.
It's to give a little bit of background on Scotty. I call him Scotty. Scotty was a professional cyclist for a number of years who, you'll hear in his story, events took place that caused him to go in a new direction. And part of one of the things that I am excited to talk about with you, Scott, is for you to kind of share your story of where you are today. And the cherry on top here, everyone, just to give you a little bit of flavor, is Scotty sits in Gallup, New Mexico, and he spends most of his time on the Navajo Res there working with kids and bikes. And it's a super inspiring story. And I'm really excited for you to share it with us because I think it'll have a really big impact. So thanks for showing up. And maybe if you wouldn't mind, start with, how you first fell in love with the bike, or maybe what bike was it that you saw first that really caught your heart,
Actually, I'm answering this. Thanks for the question. I've never really actually had that question.
Okay.
But
you could disregard the question. It was
no,
it's actually
joke. It's quite revealing. And this is actually kind of a stake in the ground. I feel like that I grew up with two older brothers, and they had, they were rocking the Mongoose BMX bikes, and I remember as the third brother, I got a Schwinn from my parents,
Boom.
And I remember riding down the street with Trevor, my oldest brother, and you're a good friend.
Yeah.
And he said to me, "Oh, Scotty, it's like a baby mongoose." And I was like, So maybe that actually sent me off in a different trajectory, because I think the first bike that actually captivated me was actually a road bike. And my BMX got stolen down at Bill's Sports Collectibles down on Broadway, buying football cards. And I guess I never went back. And there was this brown road bike that we got from Green Tree Cyclery down the street that my parents bought me. I still remember it hanging on the hook, but nobody else, there's no precedent for that. Aaron and Trevor didn't have road bikes.
No, that was you blazing a new direction. But how did you end up becoming a professional cyclist?
I guess to cut to the chase, by listening ultimately to myself. I can't take credit for necessarily all of that. It's more a lot of sort of pinball kind of like experiences that brought me to a place where that was seemed like not only a viable goal, but at least one worth exploring. But I would say I fell into it from a human, gross muscular standpoint about not struggling, but being challenged to navigate my attention deficit disorder my whole life.
Uh-huh.
And I looking back on it and understanding why perhaps I felt so good on the bike is because it allowed it was an apparatus that allowed me to focus, listen to myself. It put a moratorium on all those outside influences or pressures. And and I could explore. I could explore myself. I could also explore the world. So, what happened, matter of factly, was I graduated college with a social degree, always intending to get a master's in social work. And everyone was like, Scotty, you're so sensitive. You should be a social worker. And so I set up actually down in this region, a school counselor internship. And I worked with the kids here coming from the res. We're not on the res right here. We're a border town in Gallup. And also kids down in Zuni. So Zuni and Navajo. And I went through that year doing some outdoor rec, some ropes course training, doing different. And I was like, And the lies and what these kids, these challenges that they're born into, they're living through. I realized I'm sensitive and I should not be a social worker. So that's
when you got more seriously on the bike. You said, okay,
yeah,
I'm going to get on the bike.
I think I found even more refuge within that sort of pursuit. And then,
well, tell us about your career as a cyclist. I mean, it's pretty unbelievable what you did, my friend.
I was in Colorado, just to kind of put a place to it, and started chipping my way against the amateur categories, and was able to work my way up into these pro amateur events. And I think not only, I guess, my own pursuit, but or on my own energy and excitement, I think that worked my way into a context where there was other folk pursuing that same passion or that same pursuit, like the same goal, the same finish line, literally. And there's energy you could feed off from that. It's also, provides a lot of pressure, put you kind of in a hot cooker to either succeed or fail. But, provided I was, enjoying it the whole time, it's not like it's a loss. And that's other things I could speak on, that there's actually more to it than I realized at the moment. I was almost like chasing the plastic rabbit, trying to kind of meet this measure that the industry, the yardstick the industry put together, which was motivating, and then you put that sort of in a fishbowl, or, get a group of, captive audience around those events. And, I think it really brought more out of me than, I guess I even had an idea for, as far as there's no precedent in my life for this.
But you're being modest, Scotty. Scotty went on to get on one of the leading road cyclist teams, BMC road bikes, race all over the country. And he, at one point, the biggest race in the United States, the Tour of California, was King of the Mountains for one of the stages. He was on the cover of cycling magazines as kind of the next prodigy. And then what happened?
Well, I would also, attribute to my attention deficit is I had a number of crashes, and I crashed out, and I had a bleed on left side frontal lobe, and it stopped, but it's an indication that you've hit your head too many times and you have to stop. And the doctors at Stanford University said, you need to find a new hobby. Whatever you were doing that caused these head injuries, do something else. And so there was like a hard stop that I think I'm still trying to come to a complete stop. But yeah.
So that was a big deal, because I know a helicopter lifted you off the course. You didn't remember anything. You come out. It was a long recovery for you, and then the question is you pour so much of your life into a certain category, where do you go next? And what was the next journey for you?
Well, I think I've I don't know where I first heard of this, but Renee Relke or Relke, the authors, maybe it's the book. I don't finish many books. I start them. But it was, about living the question. What are the answers to life? Well, you need to live the question. And I think was about then that I started living the question, you know, where to go now, or, what does this all mean? Because it's also something that still is like, I guess I hold within inside me, and it actually helps within my relationships and pursuits these days, is that I have a, I guess, a successful test piece. Like, I really, I went into the unknown about like deciding to pursue this, something that I really was gravitated to, or it really held my attention, really held my human body and, you know, my soul. And that led to, I guess, in a sense, like, I mean, I'm not putting myself, this is where you might start losing your listeners. I'm not putting myself on the same level as Jim Carrey, the actor. Okay. But one thing that Jim Carrey has said in a commencement speech, maybe many of you have heard it on YouTube, about him writing a check for himself on a napkin for $10 million and saying, hey, I'm going to cash this someday, you know? And sure enough, he cashed that and then some, right? You know, but he said on stage, he said to these graduate college students that I'm here as living proof that your dreams can come true. And I relate to that, you know, because I always thought like, wow, if it stopped here, it went further than I ever thought. So I'm not going to be disappointed. It's all bonus, right? Well, you know, at a certain point, that bonus also left me off at a cliff. And I think, I guess, back to living the question is like, wow, what was it that all brought that to fruition, you know, within me and those surrounding me, and my engagement, my interplay? And then what does this mean as to like how I can continue to be on this earth and, you know, maybe stay at that same caliber of a mission? I mean, the one thing about the road bike is mountain bike racers and races, and you'll get a lot of comments on this, but I say they measure things in imperial, like inches, you know, 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, 1/16. Whereas like road cycling is in millimeters, you know, and it's like such a scrutinized profession. And there was kind of a yes, no answer to every question during that time. It's like, hey, Scott, you want to go out to dinner? And it's like, is this good for my training or bad for my training? Yes or no? And it's like, no, I got to pass. I got a big day tomorrow or something, you know? I think that's probably the biggest disappointment I was left with. You know, the racing is dramatic. You know, there's identity formation within all that I also had to shed. But I think what was very difficult was having such a straightforward mission in mind as to what else I was trying to pursue. And then also, what's also disappointing and kind of a lament is I was surrounded in a circumstance, a petri dish that was encouraging all of it to the most.
But then, Scotty, you went to a totally different petri dish. You went to Rwanda.
Yeah, it's a bigger petri dish.
And landed there. Briefly, tell us the story of Rwanda and how the bike took you there.
Well, you said it. The bike took me there. You know, this relationship I created with this like human invention. You know, and if I try to think about like all the relationships I've made through the bike, I couldn't answer that. You know, all the places I've dreamt and wanted to go because the bike was in my life. You know, it's like, wow, I think it's exponentially broadened my world and my relationships. One of those was in Northern California, where the BMC racing team was stationed in Santa Rosa, just up the coast on, I should know the name of the road, but like it's right up off of Highway 1, right up above Fort Ross is where Tom Ritchie has a camp, has this, you know, cabin and, tools out front as if he has a farm, but it's more like he has a welding shack and he welds up bikes, and he's one of the, he's the fourth. Actually, I've heard there's a lot of people who perhaps have helped start the mountain bike, but they really say Tom Ritchie gave birth to it in the sense of like, he's the one who really put it together. And I appreciate that. Well, so I met Tom Ritchie through you, Dan, and again, relationship. And my wife, Jennifer, was able to go up there for dinner, and Tom and I went for a ride. And I think I had this, again, living the question, I asked Tom, like, hey, how do you ever quit or retire from racing? Like, okay, Grandmaster, like, help me, And
just for context, Tom Ritchie Cycling, it's a company that Tom founded after his cycling career, and they produce all sorts of high performance cycling parts. And anyway, so you're sitting in his living room talking about how to recover.
Yeah, and he said to me, he's like, "Well, how do you retire from racing, Scott? Or I think I asked, how do you still ride and retire at the same time, And he's like, well, Scott, you have to retire from racing probably every ride you go on from here out. And I think it's like, yeah, that's in a sense like that animal, or that sort of like context, or that perspective, is always going to be there. But also, credit to Tom Ritchie and his involvement with starting Project Rwanda and cargo bikes, helping people distribute things you were involved in as well, Dan, to a great deal. That there's also this other world to this invention than just what, the industry kind of spoon feeds to us, which is performance, right?
Right. And so you went from the most elite cycling environment to a place where they're riding on steel Chinese-made bikes, and the racing team that did exist, in the early stages, was riding on 20-plus-year-old racing bikes. And you show up and figure out how to make a difference.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh. Back to the education, I guess I was trying to find a home within this, and I knew that, like, I kind of got evicted from the fraternity or the frat, I didn't quite produce and got kicked, but in a very good way. BMC Racing Team honored my contract and took great care of me. Gavin Chilcott has affected my life, my eternity, as far as I can say, and so many others by starting a team. And what all of a sudden you get like popped out of, like, talking to Tom Ritchie and telling you to retire every bike ride you go on, and also I think it was that same dinner over the table, he said, hey, have you ever thought of going to Rwanda? And it's like, well, I've been watching. I think Team Rwanda and all that started happening right when I started, like, really kind of putting the Lego blocks in place as far as my career. And it was always something that I think I was open-hearted to. So anyhow, Team Rwanda at that point, as far as there was a national team that got started, again, through a nonprofit, through this institution that was a place setting, and that'll play into what we're doing now. But like, it expedited this opportunity for Rwandan cyclists to get in the game before, like, say, the National Federation caught on, and then helped it, right? And then, I don't know. I guess I was given an opportunity to go over there and just, start the project over, in a way, as far as like understanding what this thing is we're sitting on.
What was it like? What was your impression of the Rwandan Fed and their perspective of the bike and its its potential impact? Was it different than in the United States? What were some of your takeaways?
I haven't said this in the context of Rwanda before, but like, there was a vacancy in lifestyle, right? There was a void. And one thing I've said about the project here, reservation life or places where things don't exist or opportunities don't exist, therefore pursuits are already decided for based on certain,
Right.
as opposed to being a person's decision.
Uh,
The void in that, there's this like stoic way of like, the obstacle is what's the direction? Well, the obstacle is the way, or something. Well, in this case, or say, Central Africa, as far as the bike goes, Navajo Nation, where there's not a single bike shop across the entire largest reservation nation across the country, which is the size of West Virginia. You add Hopi Reservation in the middle of it, it's as big as Ohio, all New England states put together. There's not one bike shop. And so the void in that circumstance is the opportunity. And I think that's what, there was years of work prior to my getting there. But I think that what I saw happening is for each of those, riders who would show up to the camps and ride in on Mondays, some, Emmanuel from, forgot the north of Kigali, he would ride 100 miles in on Monday or some, maybe it's kilometers, but either way, it was a big ride. And then we'd train Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It'd take off Friday morning. And, but for each one of those guys, it was a decision they were pursuing and they had the opportunity to pursue. And it was transformative, not just for them, but like for their families, and that's a world that I saw, an impact I saw, back to the sort of like how many people I met through the bicycle, like the exponential effect of this experience. So
did that inform what you're doing today? How much of the Rwandan example come and kind of inspire some of the things that you're doing today on the reservation?
I would say it on a fundamental level, it affected it in the sense that like the relationships and the support we found through that, which is now called Team Africa Rising with Jock and Kim, that when I started a nonprofit here in Gallup. So Jennifer, my wife, and I met in Northern California. I would actually say she's the one person I met the whole time in Northern California that didn't have any string attached to the bicycle. Met her at a Starbucks. Went up to her and said hi, that's about it. And but then after we had our first son, Jack, after we returned from Rwanda, she was looking for a new place to go to work. And since I had been out here and spent a year in that internship and had relationships, and also needed to kind of set myself out of the context of what was such a petri dish,
The cycling space. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it became a litmus test within Northern California. Here I am with a head injury, right? And basically the doctors are saying, hey, you had a bleed on your frontal lobe. If you hit your head again, the same thing will happen, if not worse. And then, engaging with my community and be like, hey, man, I really hope you get back to it. It's like, don't you see this as lethal? It was just sort of a facet that in which connects. Anyhow, back to moving out here where there isn't a context for the bike. I mean, there's certain people who are flourishing through it, but they've made it happen themselves somehow on the res, and also, teachers and medical professionals here in Gallup, but there's no culture of it. There was no sort of like sharing, I would say. So it's kind of a blank slate. And so anyhow, Kim from Team Africa Rising helped me write the first grant with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, trying to address isolation in the U.S. using an international model. And it was like, okay, what does social isolation look like? What is it, first of all? Like, I haven't used that term. And then what does it look like across the Navajo Nation or on reservation life? And is there something we could do to bring what took place in Rwanda, which, grew to a substantial affiliation or a federation of cycling? I mean, I don't know the details. There might have been a cycling federation, but what really brought and bolstered it and then welcomed on surrounding countries who are also in that same void of context. How could we put what was put in play in Rwanda here on Navajo? And well, we didn't get the grant, but what happened is it forced me to start Googling social isolation, and also started me to understand like the effects of social isolation, which are all this array of different morbidities, suicide, self-harm, substance abuse, physical abuse, sexual, emotional abuse, dysfunction, and so it's like, I mean, that's basically the definition of a reservation is it's segregation, it's displacement. Well, in this case, Navajo has their traditional lands, not all of it, but like a substantial part. They're on homeland. But at the same time, they're systemically isolated, right? And then also geographically isolated. And maybe these little kids are born into situations like that, and how do they navigate? What are their opportunities they can decide themselves? And someone here in Gallup, so we're in Gallup, New Mexico, I-40. Los Angeles is 10 hours down the left, or as I'm facing to the west. It doesn't mean artists or any necessary kid come from the res shoot down there and flourish, but Fitz Sargent, who lived here, he's, a descendant of, I think, Singer Sargent, the Impressionist painter from back east, was here with his sister. And he said, Scott, the artists from the res, this is kind of how I see it, is that he started Art 123 and Gallup Arts. He said, a kid could become an artist and start working in Gallup. And the kid could go from the reservation to Gallup and then flourish in Los Angeles. But a kid's not going to go from the reservation to Los Angeles. So that's kind of the interplay that it's like we're at the fulcrum of some sort, or the pivot point, or, one of the three lines of a triangle, maybe, hopefully, because we want that to connect, but
what does a white boy from Colorado do showing up in Gallup, New Mexico, and has a bike and thinks he's going to be useful there, or maybe he's there for other reasons than to be useful. Maybe he's there just to try to find himself. What is it? What's the path that you followed, and what's it turned into today?
I'll speak in imagery on this. I was with my son Charlie, our second boy, who's going to Rehoboth Christian School, a missionary school here on the outskirts of Navajo and Zuni. And we went on a 2-day field trip to Santa Fe, which is like, the epicenter of Spanish colonialism. We visited a ranchero, how, the Spanish colonial folk made it happen here in the land, and what was the engagement with, Native American, so on. And then we went on to the New Mexico Art Museum, the New Mexico History Museum, and talk about like a moment in time where a lot of 75% of the kids Charlie's with are all Navajo kids and some Zuni, And we're in this museum, and the museum director saying, "Hey, well, let me tell you about history." And it's like, whereas like, I think, Dan, you and I were speaking before about like, what's the impression these kids born into the reservation system as Native, what are they being communicated to, from North America, from the United States, um, you know, the narrative is that they were banished, The illustration, one of the paintings in the art museum was this Native American man. And here's the thing, it was painted by Native American. Okay. Process is the outcome. That's one big mantra. Make a t-shirt, process is the outcome. Who painted that is the outcome. And it's a Native American chief. He looks, even Native American, Lakota father who was with us. He said he looks a lot like Sitting Bull. He had two feathers, one leaning over, and he had a prayer blanket over his lap. And out the window in the back was a Capitol building. He had a little bit of war paint on his forehead. He had moccasins on. My son Charlie even said, "You can't see the stool he's sitting on," And it's like, it's almost like he's floating in the room, And it's like, wow, I'm just shout out to Charlie for that. But back to my imagery is that in the painting, he has, a worker's hand, big hand sitting on his lap on top of the prayer blanket over his lap. In the other hand, he's cradling like a Abraham Lincoln top hat. It's actually in his right arm. Right behind is the window going out to the Capitol. And it's like, in that painting, here's a Native American leader back in the colonial era, holding both, one hand on his prayer blanket, the other hand in urban society, And I think that's like, there it is. That's it. These kids have one foot on the res, they have one foot out. How do they navigate that? And
but so, how are you helping them? How are you helping them, Scotty? Tell me about the program that you're running. I mean, just for context, Scotty rides around in this giant blue bread truck, and it is the coolest thing. He goes throughout the res on this thing. He's got a dog named Tazzy that looks, is a Tazadoodle. I don't know what it is. You have kids and bikes overflowing out, all the time. Tell the audience about what you're doing.
Well, I think it's like what we're doing, meaning that like the Silver Stallion Bicycle and Coffee Works came here, and there's an awesome bread maker. We started a for-profit business, coffee shop and a bread shop. He was a food core guy coming from the East Coast, baking this incredible bread out of a pizza oven at a pizza joint Friday nights, getting out of there before the pizza joint opened up and putting all this artisan bread in the bar at this. I'm like, man, you need a coffee shop for this. So I invested in my coffee shop side and built the place out. He bought a 3-deck Niue oven and started, competing on Instagram with country with his bread, and fantastic job. He went back east. I was there with the space, the coffee shop, and we're in a border town, Gallup. There's not enough foot traffic to put my kids through college, let alone pay the bills with just coffee in Gallup. You need to be partnered with something. So here I am, I guess like 6 years later, six-ish later, and wondering, okay, well, I have the coffee equipment, I have the space, I see there's a need within, there's a community here. Like, okay, Scott, what's your place in this world? And what now, being an entrepreneur for the first time and realizing starting a business is like marriage, for better or for worse, you better be in on it. Otherwise it's not going to go. I'm like, what am I committed to till I die? And it's like the bike. And I want the bike in the center of my life again, but like, it couldn't necessarily be there in my life. I mean, I was told it couldn't be, actually, physically I couldn't hold it the same way I did before. So I went into this with a bias, right? So I'm like, let's start a nonprofit coffee shop, nonprofit bike shop, put them together, provide a service to the community at an approachable, affordable rate. And then meanwhile, have these programs where youth and young adults are learning the skills of bicycle mechanic service, as well as specialty coffee services. And what are the two international, global, industries? Well, probably bikes and coffee. There's thousands of doors youth and young adults could walk through if they knew how to wrench on a bike or pull a shot and draw a little latte art and slide it across the counter, And if anything, it's not necessarily whether or not they get the job. It's just a matter of whether or not they had the sense of agency that they could, And I think about back to my pursuits. It's like, somehow I looked at the ceiling. I was like, I haven't reached my ceiling in bicycle racing. I'm going to go until it stops, Where did I get that? Where did I have that belief in myself, at least enough courage and agency to pursue some of that unknown, I came from somewhere. It didn't come necessarily from my decision or like someone giving me a motivational speech. It came from my learned optimism within my environment,
To go into the res and play and just in partner with some pretty incredible stories and people. What are you guys working towards today? Tell us a little bit about those that you're working and partnering with on the res.
One is that it's not an import. I mean, there's some awesome, badass people who have made the bike part of their life on Navajo. Well, how did they do it? Well, did they do it because the industry rolled things downhill to them? Well, no. There's not a petri dish on the res, What happens when you walk into a bike shop? You have the material capital, you have mechanics and, sales, that you have the intellectual capital. And then what is the byproduct of that? The social capital, and those are the three mandatory necessities in order to flourish, So and that's what happened to me. I found a bike shop, bought a bike, would go in the morning and be like, hey, Doug, how's it going? He's the mechanic. I'm going to go ride up the pass in Colorado today, and I'm going to come back. I'll see you later. And what did I have there? I had context. I had material, intellectual, had social. I pursued my dreams. That gave me, outside of my family, the opportunity to, nose my way forward. And
you're saying that's void in the environment on the rest.
So whoever's made it a part of their life, they've done it despite their circumstance, despite the industry. So a little beef, I guess I have, and it's like, I got to be careful with this, because our true north, the answer back to the mission, this is basically giving away the ending to all this or something. It's like, I had a mission before with racing. Our mission today is the answer, again, yes or no question to every circumstance that comes up is, whether it be a dilemma with a coworker, or it be like whatever decision, do I confront that or not, or do I? It's like, what's best for the kids, and that's your true north. And in the sense of like our bike programming, what's best for the kids? Well, what's best for the kids is two things primarily. Is one is like, process is the outcome. It's important that it's, in a sense, this is a sovereign effort, meaning there's ridership within Navajo and it should grow from there. And it shouldn't necessarily grow to meet, like I was doing in racing, to meet someone else's benchmark. It should grow for the sake of growing.
So
for again, the process is the outcome, the integrity is already there. It doesn't need to go anywhere else. It doesn't have to leave the reservation, and I mean,
that's beautiful, man.
That's
Tell me, we got to close it up here, but I'd like to, there's one question I have is, what have you learned the most from being engaged on the res? What is some of the realities that maybe you've come away and learnings that most of us in America just would never have a chance to even learn.
I guess to try to put this at 30,000 foot view or so, is like the conversations we avoid, they still weigh on us, even though we can avoid them perhaps. But I also want to couple that with empathy. We also don't necessarily have the right context for those conversations. We don't necessarily, okay, you want to help, save starving children. Well, shoot, how do I even start? Where is that portal? Where's that relationship? And how do you even engage on those really more profound levels? And I think back to, I guess, the 30,000, 20,000, 10,000, maybe even 1,000 foot view on this, which means it's quite close to home, is what was it, that situation I was born into? And let me follow the string back on what that has meant to my life as it's come to now, versus others, born into very different situations. That, the best thing that I've been able to, no, it's not even a decision of mine. It's almost more something that's been kind of with an earnest honesty that it gets as close to honest as possible about what is growth, what is healing, what is the way forward. That doesn't just push me forward or create distance. How to all boats, rising tide raises all boats, and say that meaning that hopefully, right? But just that my ownership and honesty with myself is probably the best thing that I could provide the world. And in this sense, it's or if you think of what each of us offer to each other, in the sense of helicopter support, hey Dan, how you doing, man? How can I help you, my friend? As if I'm this oak tree, is that I think that our engagement and our support needs, and I offer this as I don't quite have articulation or the answer, let alone the ability to articulate this, but our engagement needs to bring what's healing is that our engagement in addressing these issues, these unresolved things, they bring us together. They don't welfare, hey, here's a free bike. Good luck, kid. What that does is that's okay, I'm obviously somebody who's in need, and this person's obviously somebody who has the means to give, which is true. But that process just sort of differentiates ourselves in, again, process is the outcome. Whereas if we're all kind of carrying our own together, that can bring us together. And I think that's where, you think about reparations of if you wanted to, and I'll get back to our mission and I'll tell you about our organization real quick, but if you think about reparations on this continent, and if we were going to okay, let's go back to start. Well, where do we start? We start with Native America. And if there's going to be reparations that are going to happen, let's start with the kids. So what does that mean? That means getting down in the parking lot when they show up and saying, hey, kids, looking them in the eye. How you doing? Where do we go from here? And that's the start. That's where, meeting the kids where they're at. That's where things can grow. And really being, again, honest with like, okay, I'm pedaling my bike. You want to jump on yours and pedal yours? Let's do it together. And that's the thing about the bike is like, I can't.
And it sounds like what you're saying though, too, is that I've got a bunch of crap too.
Coop, sorry. Did I mute you?
No, you're saying I have a bunch of baggage myself. It's not that you're looking at the res and the native community there as being exclusively the ones with challenges. You're saying I got a bunch of challenges, and I'm going to get on my bike and work out those challenges alongside your getting on your bike and working on yours. That's totally different posture than showing up and kind of helicoptering down with solutions. Also, the difference is too is that you live there. It's your life. Every day you show up, and this is how you're choosing to live your life, and that is pretty amazing. And I don't mean it in a hero sense. I mean it more in a way that, Scotty, I can see the way it's just transforming you into, a pretty special human. And I'm just so proud of what you're doing there. I think it's really exciting. I want you to please now tell us how people can follow you, how people can hear more about what you're doing, and if anything, if there's ways to help, great. But tell us how they can connect.
Well, we started this nonprofit as to educate, empower youth and young adults in the bicycle mechanic repair and specialty coffee service industries. That's what State of New Mexico Secretary of State understands us as. Where did we start? We started with youth development in the sense that we needed to create our own demand. We needed to create a vision for kids to be like, hey, I want to be a mechanic, mom, sort of thing, and then come and join us at the shop and embark in this lifestyle. So that's been our journey. What we're trying to do now is we're starting what you're looking at is a recycle bike shop. It's a nonprofit. This is kind of like in the margins. You see them in the back alleyway, the garage doors open, and then there's bikes that we're trying to keep out of the trash, keep from going in the ground and give them new life. And in this case, provide affordable, approachable, entry into the experience here in this region. Well, where did this all start? Well, when I was starting the coffee shop back in the day, Fitz Sargent, the same guy I was telling you about earlier, said, the old Silver Stallion saloon that got shut down here on Route 66. Well, this sign that has this big neon rearing horse, the Silver Stallion, they want to keep it on Route 66. You want the sign? And I'm like, how much? He's like, what do you got? And I'm like, $300. So I bought this Route 66 sign. We got a grant, moved it from the spot, plopped it right in the center of Gallup, right in the walkway, right next to downtown, next to the old theater. Had a back entry alley access way. But what that has meant is that's where our namesake comes from, www.silverstallion.org. And theoretically, what we're doing is we're recycling something that's an emblem of really bad practice, which is exploiting severe alcoholism. And what we're trying to do is provide an alternative to...
Meaning the Silver Stallion Saloon, it was a saloon, and now it's been metamorphosized into something that's...
Yeah, we're recycling it, and in a sense of trying our best to provide a viable path for kids to get catalyzed in ridership with the support of the material, intellectual, social, and then to provide the needed steps to pursue that. So what we're doing is we're leveraging the industry. There's a lot of vetted, awesome nonprofits out there that provide those intellectual material, and we provide the social, in a sense, I guess, or the teachers do. And to use those within a systems approach, addressing a systemic problem, to put in play these equitable initiatives to get kids riding within schools. And then we come in after school. Anyhow, how you could help, or I could go on about our organization for a while, but go to www.silverstallion.org, check us out. There's our contact there. This is a great opportunity. I think it's one last story is AJ Murphy up in Crown Point, poetic dude. He's like, Scott, the way in which everybody can connect through the bike, it transcends our differences. It's a moratorium on how we understand ourselves based on what we have different. And I was just like, so. Well,
that's a good way to end it, my friend. Thank you so much for sharing. I love you. Please, if you're driving through Gallup, stop at the coffee shop, Silver Stallion Coffee Shop, and learn more about this incredible story unfolding in Gallup and into Navajo Res. It's an honor to be with you, and thank you for your time today, my friend.
Thanks, Coop.
For information about investing in character-led companies, please visit www.rocinvestments.com and join the growing number of investors choosing to make character a priority when investing their money.